So these are a 6mm. To remove the brake caliper, and all you do is undo those two nuts. So I've got a bit of copper grease on from the last clean. It's worth greasing up those with a bit of copper grease. And drop that down. And to get the pads out on this bike, there's a pin inside there. If you push down the pads, that sometimes frees up the pin a little bit, and you can see, just squeeze it, giving that a squeeze, and that's that pin out. So that'll need a bit of a rub, sometimes some emery cloth, but I think a bit of brake cleaner will do that, and then I'll put some copper grease back on it. Put it first, second. These aren't that dirty, so I'm not going to be giving them a massive clean on the bottom. I'll give those a wipe on that guide at the bottom. The main thing I want to clean is this, even though actually it is looking very clean. This just pops out, if you can get to it. Be careful not to. Inside there it's just metal anyway. And the only reason I'm going to get that out, which I might not need to today to be fair, is so I can rotate the piston so I can clean underneath properly and have a good look at it. This seems hard to get out, but once it's coming, it comes out really easy. It's easy with my fingers. That's all that is, that sits in there. It's hard plastic. Nothing goes off in there. It's just the inside of the piston. The brakes, the pump. Only so far, because obviously that's how much was inside the bike anyway. Been a bit rusty on the edges there. It's just surface rust. Brake cleaner. Every now and again you can get a bucket of soapy water and you can give it a good old clean with soapy water and a brush if they're really dirty. This is ideal for a bit of a maintenance clean. Inspect it. These pistons never go all the way in, so that's not really a big issue with those little edges there, but I think at some point on the next brake service I will replace this piston. You could also sand that down with some 1500 grit or 2000 grit sandpaper if you worry about it. I'm not, because I know it's not going to go inside. And then you've got a brake caliper tool inside. Rotate piston so you can have another look at it. The piston in general is in quite good condition. This paper towel's not the best. I have to blow that off before I use it. But this is a really clean piston. And it's done about 1400 miles since the last clean, I think. So, is that a mark? That's just a bit of So I often give this a blow with the compressed air, just get rid of the dust, because that's going to be getting pushed back in a minute. Inspect your pads. There's a bit of funny wear on that pad, but I think it's probably due a new disc on the back of this soon. They do work okay, so those pads will be staying in for a while. Sometimes give them a rub together in case they're glazing over anything. Apparently you're not meant to use brake cleaner on brake pads. Everyone's got different opinions on it. I honestly don't see the big deal. If you're better. Wash them with soapy water if you like. And on the back of those we'll put a little dab of copper slip before we install. So we'll clean the pin, some brake cleaner on a cloth, and just give that a rub. Despite how it looks, it is still relatively smooth. Every now and again give them a rub down, but that's doing its job. When you buy a brake service kit, it's worth buying a new pin. Now the Haynes manual, some people use red rubber grease when using it clean, some people leave those dry, but it doesn't hurt just to pop a little bit of brake fluid, clean brake fluid, onto the piston before we push it back in. Just lubricates those seals. It's not going to hurt anything. I don't really need to rotate it, I can get my finger under there to give it put some brake fluid on there. There's many tools you can use to push them back in. I've got a brake caliper tool, but you could use some big grips if you wanted. And this just sits in there. So giving that a good push works. I did loosen the filler cap just to help that along a little bit. Now, because we put a bit of brake fluid around that, let's dry that off. Remove any excess. And then we're going to put a tiny bit of copper slip on the bottom guides. And a tiny bit on the back of the pads. It's not always necessary, depending on what type of bike you've got. This goes back to the olden days really, but it does help stop squeak if there's any metal to metal contact. So you might as well put it on. A tiny bit on the pin. Yes, the gloves have ripped already. They're normally really good, these gloves actually, but today not so much. And for the reinstall, that sits in there. And this one sits in its own little, if you look at the pin at the bottom, you've got a big bit and a small bit, because this bit stays where it is and this bit moves back and forward. So that make sure you get that seated correctly on that bottom copper brass thing, whatever it is. Put the pin back into place. Make sure you clean off any residue. I tend to clean it when it's back on the bike as well. And then bolt back into place. The torque setting for these is 25 Newton meters. Remember to pump the brake, to put the pads back onto the disc, and then you're done. Like I say, I will be rotating the wheel at the weekend. I'll be giving the disc one final clean while it's in place. The brake disc, there's some brake cleaner on there, but it's pretty clean anyway. It had a wash last week and we've got him from the bad weather. So that's it for the rear brake caliper clean.